This really took shape over the weekend, where Columbia University President Minouche Shafik, is that how you say her name? Shafik? I don't know how to say her name. But she was called into Congress for her time in the barrel. Don't forget, they brought in the president of UPenn. They brought in the president of MIT. Now it was Columbia University's time in the barrel. She had to go for her congressional struggle session, if you will. And in anticipation of being thrown under the bus, students at the university created a Gaza Solidarity encampment. So here's a student explaining what this is about as their president is getting dragged before Congress.
Encampment today because Columbia University has continually refused to listen to the student body when we demand that they divest from the ongoing genocide in Gaza. We have tried referendums, we have tried peacefully protesting. At every turn, they have violated their own policies to crack down, and so we decided that an escalation was necessary because we refused to have this go on for any longer. We decided to have this encampment here today because it's the same day that our university president was testified in front of Congress, throwing all of us under the bus, bragging about the fact that she has suspended students, that she has cracked down on pro-Palestine activism to an unprecedented degree. And we wanted to, in fact, shift the focus away from this political theater back to the situation in Gaza and to our demands. The reason why we've been doing this and why this movement has grown exponentially in the first place is for the people in Palestine, and we will not back down no matter how many congressional hearings they have trying to throw us under the bus.
Good for her. Good for them.
Yep.
So here's what she's talking about. Now, look, there were a lot of clips to choose from when it came to highlighting the degree to which this dingbat university president threw her students under the bus, but none more brilliantly demonstrates it than this clip, where you have the president of an Ivy League university, which is a pillar of intellectual vigor, being asked the most cartoonishly absurd question imaginable by some fucking Christian right whack job, Rick Allen. And from Georgia. And look at how she handles this.
Clear, it was the covenant that God made with Abraham. And that covenant was real clear. If you bless Israel, I will bless you. If you curse Israel, I will curse you. And then in the New Testament, it was confirmed that all nations would be blessed through you. So you do not know about that.
I have heard that. Now that you've explained
Okay.
it, yes, I
So
have heard that
it's
before.
now familiar. Do you consider that a serious issue? I mean, do you want Columbia University to be cursed by God of the Bible?
Definitely not.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Absolutely.
It's
What
pretty clear.
pathetic. I just want to play this last piece here. Okay.
And do you want Columbia University?
I've heard that
it's
before.
now familiar. Do you consider that a serious issue?
No. No. You're the president of Columbia University. There's nothing that Columbia University students and faculty, the whole ethos of a liberal Ivy League university is to counter ridiculous anti-intellectual nonsense like this. There's no one that these Ivy League progressives detest more than these Christian right rubes, and yet you get dragged to Congress and you have one of these idiots tell you about how, well, you don't want your Columbia University to be accursed, do you? Do you consider this a serious issue? How does any self-respecting person not say, no, of course it's not a serious issue. Of course this is superstitious nonsense. We at Columbia University, an institution of so-called higher learning and intellectual pursuit, do not take that seriously. What a ridiculous thing to ask me. Instead, she tucks her tail between her legs, not once, twice. Oh, I didn't know that. No, I certainly don't want it to be cursed. Look,
I mean, do you want Columbia University to be cursed by God of the Bible?
Definitely not.
Okay.
So
Well,
she
that's
allows
good.
herself
It's
to be
pretty clear.
totally humiliated by this person who stands for everything these progressive Ivy League universities supposedly stand in opposition to. And then to add insult to injury,
Now
same
you
day, Yeah.
Are you closer to the Hudson River or to the East River?
Yeah, right.
All right.
exactly.
Are you willing to lead your students down to the river for their baptism
Yeah,
upon your
exactly.
arrival back in New York? Well, yes.
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 Yeah, yes.
Yes, I could do that.
I could do, yeah, whatever you say. Whatever you say.
No,
It-
what a disgusting careerist. I mean, clearly all she was thinking about here is Claudine Gay, and I forget the name of the one at UPenn.
Yeah, I forget the other one too.
The chancellor at UPenn who got removed. That's it. She's just like, I'm saving my career. These Zionists have a long memory and a lot of money, and they fund a lot of grants and chairs. And if I abase myself enough, even if I'm not at Columbia, they'll always take care of me. Just like in politics, just like why they go along in politics, because they know as long as they go along, they'll get seats on boards of directors. They'll be fine. You cross these people, that's it. You're screwed.
Well, not only does she embarrass herself, her university, and really her entire institution, right? I mean, the entire institution of like elite higher education, which prides itself on being the opposite of these fucking morons. Do you want Columbia to go to hell, right? Not only does she embarrass herself.
Are you aware there's a hell mouth at 135th Street?
Yeah, exactly.
It's been well documented on Ghost Hunters.
Same day, this is what she has done. Police come in, raid the camps, and arrest over 100 students. So not only do you throw them under the bus rhetorically in Washington, D.C., then you actually sick the cops on the student protesters to break up the encampment. That is unbelievable. So here's the write-up. Columbia sends in the NYPD to arrest protesters in Tent City. For about a day and a half, pro-Palestinian activists at Columbia University set up what they called a liberated zone, a temporary community with the spirit and values they wished existed on campus always. It was an impromptu tent village with more than 50 tents pitched on a large green lawn just outside the school's imposing main library. It had a gathering area under a white awning heaped with supplies donated by fellow students. A red spray-painted sign announced its name, Gaza Solidarity Encampment. For those hours, living and gathering in the encampment felt purposeful and important, the activists said. A film screening was held after midnight. There was a teach-in. Hundreds of students marched around the encampment to show support. It really feels like we've taken over the university and made it into the vision that students want it to be, and not what these bigwigs who want to encroach on academic freedom want it to be, said Mariam Alwan, one of the organizers. But for Columbia University, the encampment was anything but an Eden. The university's president, Namat Shafiq, fresh from a congressional hearing in which she had pledged to enforce the university's rules on protests, tried to get the students to stand down. When they did not, she decided to break with a decades-long norm in the university's approach to quelling protests. She gave the police a green light to come in. The current encampment violates all of the new policies, severely disrupts campus life, and creates a harassing and intimidating environment for many of our students, she wrote in a letter to the Columbia community sent around 1:15 p.m. on Thursday. Within minutes, police officers, many in riot gear, flooded into the campus and surrounded the lawn. Inside the encampment, roughly 100 students linked arms and sat in rows. A large crowd of students and onlookers gathered. The police began to arrest the students, placing their hands into zip ties. The crowd chanted, "Shame on you," and let them go. The protesters did not resist. They had expected they would be arrested, they said, because they had vowed not to move until Columbia divests from companies supporting Israel, something the school has repeatedly said it will not do. The students were also suspended, the Columbia administration announced.
Including Ilhan Omar's daughter, apparently.
Yes, including Ilhan Omar's daughter, the day after she grilled the head of the university. Yes. As the camp was dismantled, Some onlookers dispersed, but others continued to rally. They relocated a protest to the next lawn to the west. Dozens of students hopped over a fence and formed a circle on the wet grass. Disclose, divest, we will not stop, we will not rest, they chanted. Cornel West, the public intellectual and independent candidate for president, came to address the students in solidarity. He called Columbia's response to the protesters a colossal failure in terms of morality. We know from the history of the species to stand up for truth and justice is to pay a price, Mr. West said. By 4 p.m., 2 new tents had been pitched and the Gaza Solidarity encampment sign had been resurrected and displayed again. So they were not intimidated. Here's the next day. Here's our friend Norman Finkelstein showing his support on the grounds. This is after the cops came and broke up that first protest and made that first round. So here he is. Oops, I'm sorry.
Now, the Israeli Defense Forces, it is a genocidal army. Why are you allowed to have public support for a genocide, at this moment, a genocidal state and a genocidal army? Okay, the language doesn't seem as provocative. We support the idea, but the content is 10,000 times more offensive and outrageous to any, so to speak, civilized mind and civilized heart than the "from the river to the sea" slogan. And the only reason there is an argument about that slogan, even though, as I said, I disagree with it, but that's a separate matter, whether I agree or disagree with it. The only reason there's an argument about that slogan is because we have legitimized this notion that hurt feelings are grounds for stifling speech. And that, to me, is totally unacceptable.
Yeah.
Well, as somebody pointed out, hopefully these kids, who I am sure, and we said this from the beginning when this broke out, I am sure 10 minutes ago, most of these kids supported the idea that speech is violence. I hope this is a lesson to a generation about how dangerous that idea is now that it's been turned against them.
Well, that's the point he was making there, and I thought it was really great of him to go there and say that,
Yes,
because
exactly.
he said, look, the reason this is happening to you is because they basically turned your own premise on you.
Yes,
right? And it's not a premise that they brought into it. They were taught that by the people at the university.
Yep.
It's like it's top down. But there's a reason why they set that trap, and it is a trap. That is a trap that they set for you, so that when you actually radicalize for real, right, against real power and against real interest, they can shut you down saying, well, people feel threatened by what you're saying. There were no reports of harassment or violence at those encampments. Those were peaceful protests. Right. But they're saying that your rhetoric is dangerous, and they taught students to absorb that. And so, Norm now, for the past 6.5 months, obviously, since he's devoted most of his life to this issue, he's been making the rounds talking about the horrific crimes of the Israeli state. Before that, though, his book that came out last year was about academic freedom and was all about the stifling of speech by woke identitarian progressive movements. And so great that he's able to show up there and sort of combine those two arguments by saying, hey, look, all of that wokeness was just a trap. It was just to shield them from real criticism when it became due. Real movements against real entrenched power systems. That whole discourse, that whole method of argument was meant to keep you, I will say, contained, right? Meant to contain discourse between certain boundaries that they would control. And when it got out of their control, what did they do? They called the fucking cops. Like the establishment goons they are and have always been. What did they do when there was an organic protest that ruffled the feathers of the Columbia University president and fucking Rick Allen, fucking Leatherface's brother-in-law down there when he gave her a hard time? They called the fucking police because they're not anti-establishment. They're not right. It's Columbia. It costs $60,000 a year to go to Columbia. You come out of there in debt so that you'll be a functionary of the system. And when you piss them off, they'll call the fucking police on you, which is what they did. And so it is a lesson that I hope is learned, and I think it is. I mean, I think this is sinking in. Do you want the
Antichrist to devour your innards?
Yeah, right, exactly. So good on Norm for showing up in the first place. I mean, that was big of him to do. And it was also a great point to drive home in that circumstance. What a perfect time and place to make that point. And I think the kids are learning. I mean, I think it is sinking in.
Yes. And you know what? That, and again, you hesitate to look on the bright side of such horrific circumstances. But, the Jesuits used to say, give me the child until they're 7 and I'll have them for the rest of their lives. Right. Now, hopefully that was an exaggeration, although it showed pretty good insight into what we know today about cognitive formation and childhood development. But it does feel like they're being caught at a formative enough moment that maybe we wind up with them not being another generation of dangerous whack jobs like the head of NPR, who heads a news organization and described the First Amendment as the greatest obstacle to stopping the spread of disinformation, and felt that it's a problematic precept because they were definitely on track to just continue with that script, which I don't have to tell anyone, I think, watching this show, how essentially dangerous those ideas are, how dangerous this assault on speech in the guise of that being a liberal or left position is. So now that they've really gotten a personal taste of those ideas, hopefully they will. It seems very often in history, people have to relearn what people had already known, but then they forget. It seems like they're getting a new lesson in why liberals of the 60s and 70s, many of whom had been student protesters, were so dedicated to the idea, I may not agree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it, because they themselves had been victims of this kind of repression.
Please clap.